Coming up on this episode of Common Denominator.
Yeah, I remember sitting in bed and I said, look, I have choices here. I can sit here and rot away for 5 years, or I can find some type of inspiration to try to make myself better than when I came in.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, where we shine a light on people striving to make the world a better place. Today, a man who exemplifies grit and resiliency, Tony Torres. Tony's life has taken him from prison convict to successful gym owner and entrepreneur, and a lot of other places in between. He'll share how he rebuilt his life from inside a jail cell to on top of the world. Tony and I just finished an amazing and impactful conversation, and the thing that really stood out to me is his understanding of resiliency and grit. After all the trials and tribulations that he's been through, he still maintains a positive attitude and he keeps on moving forward. So check out the episode. Hi, Tony, and welcome to Common Denominator.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I know before the show we talked a lot about your story and your journey, and we're going to get into that in more detail. But the thing that really sticks out to me is the amount of resiliency that you've had throughout. And we've talked about that concept a lot in the show, and I find it's super important. So I want to go to you as the guest. What do you think about that word? What does it mean to you?
Resilience to me is how tough is this how hard can you get beat up and still come back and unfold yourself to be able to move forward? To me, resilience is never giving up. To me, is the harder I get hit, the faster I'm going to get up and the stronger I'm going to get up. I think that I get stronger with more hits. It's like when you're in the gym, the more you punish your muscle, the bigger it gets, right? You have to be able to put yourself through that pain to know what it is and to be able to recover from it and to be able to get stronger from it.
You spent 5 years in prison.
Yes.
Right? And, and if I internalize that, I like to, for myself, like put myself in the shoes of the guests. If I internalize, sitting in prison. First of all, how did that come to be? How did it come to be that Tony Torres ended up in prison for 5 years?
I was talking before, and I had mentioned, what you do based on what you learn from your parents, and being a youngster and having a dad that I looked up to. I always remember, don't tell on your sister. Don't tell on your sister. I don't care what she did. You don't come to me with complaining about your sister. You don't tell on anybody. You don't. In other words, don't be a rat, right? You hear it all the time in movies and stuff like that. And basically, I got into a position where, my best friend was wanted for murder. At the time, I didn't know that's what it was, or an accidental death, whatever you want to call it. I didn't know it at the time, but when I was questioned about him, hey, this is my best friend. I'm not going to tell anybody where he's at. All along, he was at my house. So I was shielding him from the law. And they wanted him so bad, they sent an informant posing as his friend that owed him money. And I had said, look, I'm not going to give him up no matter what. When the cops were looking for him, he was with me, and I never gave him up. And it turned out that he was wired. And so they heard that whole conversation, and because of that, they threw the book at me, and they snatched me up.
So you got a public defender? Is that what it was? You had a public defender?
No. Well, my friend at the time said, look, if I ever get in trouble, I want you to call this guy. Mm-hmm. And he gave me the attorney's name, Tommy Lee. And I said, okay. I didn't really know why he was giving it to me because, again, whatever he was doing, I didn't know about it. And that point came, and I said, hey, you know what? I need my phone call. And I called Tommy Lee. I said, Tommy, George asked me to give you a call if he ever got in trouble, but he's not in trouble. I'm in trouble, so I need you to come help me. So he came down and got me out that first night.
So when you began that, did you actually end up sitting? You actually end up sitting for 5 years, or you got out on good behavior? Or?
I think they took out maybe 50 some odd days a year. for good behavior. So I ended up doing 4 years and something.
That first night, when you realize you're sitting in jail, that first night, and that you're going to be there for a while. We talked a little bit about that too, because I have that that extreme nature. So you want to be free, you're running all over the place, and you're in a jail cell. What was going on in your mind?
Well, that started on the ride to the court that morning, because I knew I was turning myself in. So I was mentally getting prepared, saying, I'm not going to see any of this for 5 years. So I started noticing things I never noticed before, things we take for granted on a daily basis. The leather grain on the back of the headrest the car I was sitting in. My mom's perfume, the sound of their voice as they were conversing with each other right before I was going in. I'd look out the window and look at the rooftops of each building and how different they were, and the railings on the highway and the concrete. And as I'm walking into the courthouse, just the architecture, stuff you don't look at. And I'm, when the judge slammed the hammer and I went to say bye to my mom with tears in my eyes, I turn around, and as I turn around, they just grabbed me and hauled me off. Like, I really felt like, man, I didn't do anything. Like my hair's just standing up. I didn't do anything, man. I was so mad that I didn't get to say bye to my parents for the next 5 years. I'm not gonna. And I sat in that holding cell and I just cried, and I was torn. I'm like, how could this be possible? That I didn't do any of this. I never smoked. I never sniffed. I never did drugs. I never did anything. I never robbed anybody. I was not a criminal. And I'm getting 5 years. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. And so I'm sitting in bed that night just looking at the ceiling, and I just thinking and reliving the whole day. And it's just over like a broken record, over and over and over again. And there was a time where shortly after, a couple of days after, I slept for the first like 60 days. I slept the days away, just trying to sleep the time away. So I'd be sleeping 16 hours a day, and the guard would say, kick his bed, make sure he's alive. So he would kick my bed until I move, and then they would keep moving.
What was the moment, because I know in the time you were there, you were able to kind of reframe yourself and make something better of it. What did that look like? And what was that moment that you decided, you know what, I'm going to be in here for a while, and I'm gonna make something positive of this?
Yeah, I remember sitting in bed and I said, look, I have choices here. I can sit here and rot away for 5 years, or I can find some type of inspiration to help me get myself better. What do I have here? Well, I looked around. I had a gym, I had a library, and I had my sister outside and my mom, who I can call and ask for some books, magazines, and stuff like that to try to make myself better than when I came in. So the first thing I thought was, I'm going to be a better person physically than I came in. So I hit the gym with relentless freaking, like, forget about it. I did that. And then I walked around. As I walked around, I noticed the programs they had. They had a crochet program. They had a dominoes program. They had different type of jobs. So I signed up for everything I could just to keep my brain busy and myself busy until I get myself so tired that I just wanted to go to my bunk and go to bed. And eventually I learned how to do all those things and was hired to do everything inside the prison because I was the only one that could do it. You know, everybody wants to just jerk around and be outside and play around, but I was kind of trying to make myself a better man than when I came in.
So I love that. I hear that a lot of people that spend time in prison or had their own type of prison that they broke free from, that kind of rock bottom and those moments. I think that it's important for every human to go through their own version of that.
Yeah.
Because it's like the second mountain. Because then you have a deep sense of gratitude, you have a deep appreciation for things, and it's really something amazing. And I appreciate that very much. Hearing that, I want to go back because I thought, looking and speaking before this interview, that you were before you went to prison, you were an exotic dancer. Yeah. So I just gotta, because I gotta put it out there, and it was interesting because it reminds me, everybody does something nobody really understands. As I saw this on Netflix, there was a film about the drug trade. Maybe it was in Mexico, maybe it was somewhere else, and there was this family, and this guy has tears in his eyes, talking about working in the cocaine industry in the fields. Mm-hmm. And he said, if I didn't do this, my wife and my kids would die. Like, I couldn't provide for them. This gives me a means to do this. There's always a backstory.
Right.
But tell me how you got into that, and how was that experience for you?
I tell you, the experience was, again, you grow and you learn from everything you do. I definitely grew and I learned from this experience. It started when I was working out at the gym, and there was a guy in there he had the best body in the gym. His chest, he always wore low cut, shirts, and his chest was popping out like wow, this dude is like jacked. That's what I want to look like. And I always seen him when he did his biceps, he would curl, and he had this peak on his biceps that were like avocados, like really, really, really strong. So I went down, I started trying to do what he was doing, and I don't know where he comes over to me and he goes, "You're doing that wrong." But he had this really strong accent. He goes, "You want to get the peak, you have to do it like this." And then he started to show me. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I started doing this. I was like, "Okay, all right." And he goes, "Good, keep going, keep going." So then he asked me, "What are you doing Friday?" And I said, "Nothing." Why? He goes, "You want to come with me to show?" And I'm like, "What kind of show?" He goes, "I take all my clothes with him." And I said, "Oh, yeah?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll go with you." So I went with him, and, I was just helping him out. The girls would throw tips at him. I would pick up the tips, like a little runner boy. And I did that for him for a few shows. And one day he goes, "I'm going to go out, give her my stuff." And I give her the stuff. I come back. He does his thing. He comes back in. I go out to collect all the tips from the floor and the stuff. And one of the girls says, "Hey, how about you?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I don't do this." And they all got up and grabbed me and tore my clothes off. And I went back naked to them. And he goes, "What happened?" I was like, they got a hold of me. And that was how I started getting
right. But I'm sure, but the money, you were able to pay your bills.
Yes.
And the money was good, right? So,
yes.
So there's this whole thing I think of I remember as a young child, because there's money in all different places, and people have to do whatever they have to do. I remember I used to play basketball with my neighbor, and he had the biggest house in the neighborhood. And one day I asked this guy, was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and I asked him, I said, "By the way, what do you do?" He's like, "I'll tell you, son, but you can't tell anybody." He's like, "You see those planes over there in JFK?" He's like, they have toilets, and every time they land, I have the contract to clean the toilets.
Wow.
Right? So you never know. Everybody thinks, it's got to look this way or it's got to look that way. In the end, you do what you got to do.
That's right.
You do what you got to do. If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Common Denominator podcast. My guest is gym owner and entrepreneur Tony Torres. Next week, I'll speak with Maria Killam, a home design guru who specializes in color. If you're looking to give your home a fresh new look and aren't afraid to make bold choices, you need to listen to Maria's expertise. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Now, back to the show. So you finally finished your time in prison, and you moved down to Florida,
right, and
you opened a restaurant. Because it's funny, because my son is very passionate about cooking. A few of them are. And I have him working at a restaurant right now. And I know it's complicated, but tell us about that experience in the restaurant business.
Well, while in prison, we got a TV room. So my thing was sitting in the TV room, and I got hooked on the Food Network, like watching these people make these amazing, what seemed to be tasteful dishes out of just ingredients. So it was like taking nothing and making something. And so I was hearing the terminology. I'm like, man, what's the difference between searing and basting and caramelizing and this and that? One day I get, the PA, Torres, come to the bubble. So I go to the bubble, which is where the guards hang out and the counselors. And she said, "Let me speak to you in the office." So I go to the office and she goes, "Listen, you've been a model inmate, been doing a lot of things, and from what we hear, you've been doing very well. We like to offer you an opportunity to go in a different direction with your career. So when you get out of here, which is soon, you can start a new life and, beat that recidivism rate that they talk about. So I said, yeah. He said, what would you like to do? I said, I like to cook. He goes, okay, so get us the name of a place where you want to go study, and we will send them the check. And so I was released. I went into the culinary school, New York Culinary Academy on Canal Street, New York, and signed the paperwork. And sure enough, they got the check, and I got my uniform, and I was in school. And I was in school. I was back in New York, worked in this restaurant, a franchise called Muscle Maker Grill. And I said, wow, this is amazing. I'm into fitness where I'm cooking, I'm making fitness food and stuff like that. When I get out of here, when I finish my probation, I'm going right to Florida and I'm going to open one of these things. Boom. Turns out I was like a week away from my probation release. And where I was living, the landlord's brother came over to eat. Now, the kitchen was you cook and you turn around and you serve the person. And I turned around, I served, my landlord's brother, and he goes, wow, this is delicious, man. Like, what kind of place is this? It's a healthy place. This is amazing. If I had an investor, I'd go to Florida. He goes, really? How much? And I said, the franchise fee is $35,000. He goes, really? I was like, if you write a check right now, I'll leave. And he goes, you would? And I said, yeah. Wow. He took out his checkbook and he wrote the check.
Wow, that's great.
And he put it on the counter, and I looked at it and I said, oh. And I took it, and then I turned around, and right there at the moment, I told my boss, who was the owner, I said, hey, Mario, look, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I have an opportunity. I'm going to take it. And it was one of those things, when the opportunity comes, you have to decide. You got to pull the trigger. If you don't, the opportunity walks and you're gone. You lose it.
I love that you say that, because I find that that's the hardest thing. I know myself. I had to work tremendously on with, I guess, 70% of information, and I think we've talked about this on the show. But to pull triggers and be willing to be accountable and pay the price, right? So it's like, okay, you're gonna go to this boss. It's unknown. Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows what's going to be in the future.
Right.
You move into a different state, right? And you're making a decision, and so is exactly how life goes.
That's right. There's no guarantees. The only guarantee is you're not going to make it if you don't go. You don't try. That's the only guarantee.
So you're running this restaurant. How long is that? A couple of years?
The one I left from?
The one that you opened in Florida.
Okay, so now we go for like 2 days later. We go to the franchise headquarters and we buy the franchise.
Right.
So now we come to Florida and Hollywood here. We open up the restaurant, and great restaurant, great customers. I met some of the best people there. They were so happy and they loved the food. And but what I didn't know coming from New York is that whatever plaza you're in, your rent is based on the anchor stores that are in there. And I didn't know that. But and I had a Kohl's, I had a Bed Bath & Beyond, I had every best store in the damn world, and so my rent was like $25,000.
Oh my God!
Plus food and produce and all that stuff. So I just didn't understand that concept. Again, it's my first time opening a restaurant in the business, and I thought it was all freaking Emerald Lagasse and all that kind of stuff. All
no,
good.
but I love, again. Here you are. You're just going. You're just trying your best. You're doing action. You're doing action,
Yes.
and I know the story continues, because then you open a gym with partners.
Yes.
And what was that about?
Oh my God! And it's ironic that you just ask about that, because at one point, again, there was a lot more money left over to pay at the end of the month, and I said, I'm bleeding here. If I don't shut this down now, even though I love it, there's just not enough people, and it doesn't feel like it's going to be enough people to come in. So I'm going to play it smart. Before I bleed out, let me close up, and whatever money I have left, I'll go open what I love to do. And so I did that. I was working for Orange Theory Fitness. I was the first international master trainer that spoke both languages. But again, I made them a lot of money in being that. But when I wanted to open up one for myself, they nudged me and they said no. So I got upset. I said, I made you all these thousands of dollars. You don't want to help me out and give me a piece of the pie? Here's my 3 days notice. And I gave a 3 days notice. and I went ahead and started looking for gym equipment. I bump into a small studio down in Kendall, and I said, hey, listen, I'm looking for a pair of dumbbells or a rack of dumbbells, and he had a rack of dumbbells. I gave him the money for the rack of dumbbells. I said, I'll come pick them up later. And he says, what are you planning to do? And I said, I'm planning to open up a hardcore gym. Like, I had just turned pro in my sport, an IFBB pro, and they closed down the hardcore gym and they opened up a UFIT. So I need to open up my own thing, and there's none around, and I think that's a good concept. He goes, I'm looking to do the same thing. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not into partners and stuff like that. So he kept bugging me for a few weeks, and then I came in and I said, you know what? And this was my own desperation of getting my thing up.
Right.
I said, all right, you know what? But I want this. He goes, good. And so I went like this. I shook out my hand, just like old schoolers. We took a hand out, and he took his hand out, and we shook on it. And that was it. I thought that was good enough. Apparently, it wasn't. There was no contracts. There was nothing. I bought equipment. We started, housing the place. Now, mind you, he was there 5 years prior to me getting there, and he only had 36 clients. So he was paying every month to keep the place open just because he liked the sport. I get there. I'm there for 2 years, and in 2 years, we had 600 members.
Wow.
Okay. It gets worse. And so he had a 10% partner in that little thing. So it was 45, 45, 10. At some point, that 10% partner didn't like me. I didn't like him. He wasn't doing it right. He was always complaining. I said, listen, guy, if you don't want to be in this business and you hate being here, I'll buy you out. And that's it. You don't have to be here. And so my other partner says, no, he's staying and you're going. And I said, what? I built this place. What are you talking about? He goes, no, you didn't. And, I thought Ashton Kutcher was going to jump out and punk me. I was like, wait. And so that whole thing happened, and I went to see an attorney. And when I go to see the attorney says, wait a minute, this guy just hired my partner 2 weeks ago. I had him on retainer for the same thing. I'm like, what? This just happened yesterday. And so something was going on behind my back prior to this happening, right? And I had no clue. Turns out the guy tells me, look, we can fight this case and you'll win because the name is yours, the business is yours, or you have all your paperwork, but it's going to cost you about $100,000. Do you have that money? I was like, no, I don't. I thought you guys take stuff and then we win, you take, whatever. And he goes, no, it doesn't work like that. He goes, I've charged more for less. And I said, oh, God. He goes, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. He goes, you built this gym, everybody came for you. It seems like you got your shit together. He says, go down the block, open up another spot with the money you have, and they will follow you. He goes, I won't charge you for that. I was like, all right. And so that's what I did. I went down the block, opened up a gym, and here we are 6 years later. Now, this Friday that just passed, a couple of days ago, my partner was struck by a drunk driver and was killed.
That's unbelievable.
And so they text me, and I was like, who? And I had to call. I was like, who? He goes, so-and-so. And I said, what? Look at this. I said, what? And the guy was in vacation with his wife, apparently, and they were coming home Friday night, car trouble. He got out of his car to see what it was, and the drunk driver just right into him. His wife got hurt as well. She got some brain injury or something, and they transferred her down here. I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's sad because, at the end of the day, no one deserves that.
But first of all, I appreciate that. Even though, hearing that from you, meaning even though he did wrong by you, but I see and I'm hearing the compassion that you have for people, because it doesn't end that way.
No.
And what are the lessons that I'm hearing? First of all, you're constantly, again, that resiliency. You're constantly picking yourself up, constantly reinventing. I think of all things, everybody has plans. And it is. It's you got to have things in writing before you go ahead and do it.
Sure.
But also decisions and action in this world. Eventually, you figure it out.
Yeah.
Nobody knows exactly what's going to be. I look at the worst things that ever happened to me. It ended up being the best things that ever happened to me.
Yes.
Right. And here you are, right? 6 years later, Iron Temple Gym.
Yes.
Doing tremendous. You have your 9-year-old and 6-year-old boy, and you were telling me before the show you never thought you'd get married. You thought you'd be alone. Married, and you seem I'm sitting here with you from all that story. So it's like everybody has fears of what's going to happen and what's going to happen there. You're like living proof.
Yeah.
On the other side of, of what's possible if you believe and you take action.
Absolutely.
Right. So congratulations.
Not taking action is taking an action to not take the action. Right. So you don't make a decision, you're deciding. That's which is an action.
And I know there's a movie, right?
Yes.
And Iron Temple, right? About your story.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. That's wild.
So a shout out to that.
Yeah.
And there's a novel, right? There's a novel.
Yeah, that was written while I was in prison. Yeah, and I mean, I was mentioning before that I was in bed, in prison, and I'm noticing the guy across. There's a line of guys going to his locker, and he's like almost like transactional. Like, this guy selling drugs in the prison? What? And so I'm watching and I'm looking, and one day I said, you know what? I got to find out what's going on. I want to get in on this. I go over there and I was like, listen, I see all these guys coming to your locker. I'm ready for a fight. Because in prison, they're like, yo, why? And so he goes, oh, no. They come rent my books. I'm like, what do you mean rent your books? He goes, I write books. I said, you do? He goes, yeah. And he opened his locker. He had about 40 books he had written.
Wow.
While in prison, because he had 10 years to do. So I can imagine, all this time. And I said, can I read one of those books? He goes, yeah. And he just grabbed one and he gave it to me. And so I read it. And I was like, wow, this guy wrote this. I don't, it's not my language. I don't particularly, but this is incredible. And so I was like, everybody's got a good story. I think I got a good story. So I gave him back the book and I started writing mine. And then I had a friend outside. I said, listen, I just wrote this. I'm going to send you this stuff. Please start finding out this kind of stuff for me. That way I want to do this. This is going to be like, so now this kept me busy. It's one of those things. I get home, I make a run, and I think I made 2 runs of 200 books a piece, and I sold them all in strip shops.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I want to ask you, from all of this, sitting here today, what would you say the thing that you've learned the most about life?
Well, it's a few things. You never say never. I tell people never say never, man. And I don't know if that's individualized, but for me, when someone told me I couldn't do something, that was an invitation to forget about it. And every time someone told me I couldn't do it, if they bet, they lost. That was one. Resiliency is another one. You gotta get up, you gotta keep going, you gotta reinvent, you have to put another mask on you. Whatever you gotta do, just keep going. You have the mental part of it is so huge, because if you believe you can't, then you're right. But if you believe you can, then you're also right? So mentally, with physicality, with the knowing that it can be done is huge. And so if you want to do something, find someone who's doing it the best at it and just follow that framework, follow that plan. Because they're made up of the same components you are: bones, skin, organs, blood, muscle. The only difference is what's going on between your ears. And so if you take the same framework, you fail because you want to,
Yeah. I really love that. That mental work, that framework, I think that literally, to your point, it literally makes the difference of the lowest of the low and the highest of the high in actuality here in this world.
That's right.
So appreciate that. What's the thing that sticks out to you sitting today that you're the most grateful for?
I'm grateful that, number one, I get to wake up every day. That's first. And that I have the children that I have. You don't really know, they don't make a manual that says, hey, this is the way you're supposed to be with kids. But I sit and think how much I love my 2 boys and how much they fill my life, that I think about deadbeat dads. I'm like, how how the hell is this even possible? These two individuals or these kids that are just so pure. They don't know evil. They don't know malice. They don't know anything. They don't know anything but what you teach them. You mold them, right? They become ultimately who you are if that's what you want them to learn. And this is your opportunity to make these guys great, right? So everything that I learned from my dad that I love, I kept. And now I instill in them. My kids, they're like, Dad, what's this? This is a handkerchief. You never leave the house without this handkerchief. You put cologne on this handkerchief. And if you have a friend who spilled something, this is what you give them. And when you sneeze, this is what you have. And so all my boys are now, Dad, my handkerchief. And I just give my handkerchief when they come over. And it's one of those things where I tell people, like, handkerchief. Like, nowadays, they're like, what's that? I'm like, it's this handkerchief. You know?
Because I know the stat, and people think about financially, how can I afford kids? And it's getting less and less people wanting to have kids. And it was just the statement that my son had said. He must have been 8 at the time, must have been maybe a year or two ago. He turns to my wife, and we had a baby at the time. And he looks at the baby, he looks at my wife, and he says, do you get that for free? That's literally what he said.
Wow.
He's like, so God's going to give you that baby, like, just for free, like, basically, like, the greatest gift in the world. I didn't expect, when I first got married, I didn't expect to have 10 kids.
Right.
But, now it's just like, you just sit there, and it could be sleepless nights at 3 a.m, and you're just like, it's amazing.
Yes.
So I completely get it, and I appreciate it. What is something about yourself that people don't know?
I like just being at home, enjoying what I create. Just silence, right? The silence of just watching something and not being disturbed. Because with all this chaos around, it's going on. I mean, I go to the gym. When I'm at the gym, when I'm outside, I'm somebody else, because I have to be that guy who, hey, people don't come to my business for the business. They come to my business for me. You know, oh, that's Tony's gym. That's Tony's gym. Obviously, I'm a professional athlete, so a lot of people who want to do well in my sport, they come to get tips from me, and I'm glad to help, because if you're supporting my business, I'm going to support you if you come to my business. Whatever I can do to help, because you're here supporting me, I'm going to tell you, hey, you're doing that. Let me show you how to do that right. Come here. And when you're on stage, you got to do this. When you're on stage, you got to do that. Because I want them to succeed. Because when they do, hey, this is where I learned it. This is where I came to, and this is why I love coming here. I know everybody in my gym by their first name. So when they walk in, that's how I greet them. Hey, what's going on? So it's like cheers. Yo, and we have jokes and all that kind of stuff. So
exactly that detail that makes your gym successful.
Yes, and it's not like an LA Fitness. You go to LA Fitness, can I do? Yeah, it's gonna be $40 for an extra card, and it's just like so transactional. You know, when
I relate very much to the silence. By the way,
yeah,
is this constant chaos, and you have to find your own silence while you're moving through it, but to appreciate just the quiet time. It could be with music by yourself, or just in meditation and just breathing.
And sometimes I listen to jazz. So when people are like, "What do you listen to?" And I go like this, I'm like, what? I'm like, yeah, because I learned how to play piano in prison. And I bought a piano as soon as I got out, and I started, playing. And so now I listen to jazz, and I listen to the notes and it's just something people don't understand. But sometimes I'm home alone, I'm watching, and I might have a glass of wine, and I'm watching a really good movie, and something happens, and I'll go, and there's nobody there, right? And so just like I like going to movies by myself, and people are like, movies by yourself? Oh, I love it. I went to see Mission Impossible a couple of days ago.
I was going to go by myself, in the last minute, my son.
Great movie.
Yeah, great movie. Did like it too. I don't know what to do about the waiting another year for the second half, but whatever.
Yeah, it's tough.
We're gonna have to deal with that. But really, Tony, I really appreciate you coming in. It's been really eye-opening, really inspiring, and hopefully, I know that the guests will get a lot of strength from our conversation. So thank you. And is there a way that people can learn more about you or follow you on social?
Yeah, they can follow me at social on IFBB Pro Tony Torres. They can go to www.buffdadchallenge.com and irontemple.gym.com.
So Buff Dad Challenge, what exactly is that?
Well, here's how I came up with that. I'm very active with my boys. We run around the park. I take them to the playground, and I'm active. I'm the fool on the damn slide with my kids, right? And what I notice is that a lot of times I go to the park, I see, these dads that are like they're out of shape. They're maybe they don't want to be, but they can't chase the kids because they just don't have the stamina. They tire out after a minute. They're huffing and puffing, and quite frankly, it's embarrassing when the kid wants. So they're sitting on the bench, they're texting, they're doing everything but enjoying the moment, the memories, the things that that have people like me when I grew up. Like, damn, I remember when my dad, we used to run around the park. So I said, you know what? I have this thing where I can help men, or anyone for that matter, lose weight really, really fast. Like, everybody wants to lose weight yesterday, right? For some event in 2 weeks. They never wanted to. And so I figured that framework out. So I put together a program for dads, over 35, who have kids and are out of shape, and sometimes they come home and they just want to sit in the couch and be lazy. Where, you're with me for 5 days for free. All you gotta do is sign up, and I take you through facts, my frameworks, and during the time, I have you do things where at the end of the 5 days, you see already you losing a couple of pounds, and you start to realize, damn, I need to change my life. If not, these memories that I want to have are no longer going to be there. And that's just the kids for starters. I mean, if you can't perform at home, then you're going to have a problem there too.
That's amazing.
So yeah, that's why I created BuffThatChallenge.com.
Well, thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
Appreciate it.
Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Tony. Next week, I'll speak with Maria Killam. Maria is an internationally renowned design expert who specializes in color. She'll talk about the current trends and why it's time to move away from them and into something bolder, better, and brighter. She has a ton of design tips to help you fall back in love with your home. Please subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode, and follow me on social media at @Popack. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.